Good morning, everyone. For the next half an hour, let me guide you through a very important topic on diabetic retinopathy, which is one of the most recognized and dreaded complications of diabetes mellitus. To describe diabetic retinopathy, let me just simply say that when diabetes mellitus affects the retina, we will call it as diabetic retinopathy. Diabetic retinopathy is emerging as one of the most important and dreaded sight-threatening complications, not only in the advanced countries but also in India. This is happening in spite of an increase in the awareness of the disease which is present in the public, with the doctors, with the diabetologists, and also in spite of the better modalities of diagnosis and treatment. This diagram shows a small picture about the eye. There is the light that passes through the cornea, it passes through the lens, and then it strikes the back portion of the eye, which is known as the retina. From there, the light impulses travels through the optic nerve and reach the occipital cortex. This is a color photograph taken of the retina, which you will also be seeing when you look at the retina by means of your ophthalmoscope. There is the central area, which is known as the optic disc. There is the central area, which is the most important area, which is known as a macula, and then you will find that the retinal vessels take an arcuate course above and below the macula. This portion of the retina that you are now seeing is probably about half what is existing in the eye, and we will call it as the posterior region of the retina, and it is this portion of the retina that is most often affected by diabetes mellitus. What is the pathophysiology of diabetic retinopathy? It is very simple. What happens throughout the body also happens in the retina. It is known as microangiopathy. Micro means small, angio means vascular, pathy means problem. The smallest of the small vessel in the retina, which is the capillaries, undergo two processes. One, it undergoes a process of occlusion. Two, it undergoes a process of increased capillary permeability. Because of the two most important pathophysiological changes that occur in the retina, all the diabetic retinopathic features are seen in the retina. Classification. About a decade ago, we had hundreds of classification of diabetic retinopathy. Whoever was interested in diabetic retinopathy and did a lot of research on it had classification according to his name and according to his findings. Now the classifications have been made very simple. It has become very uniform, and it is very understandable for both the diabetologists, the ophthalmologists who are treating it, as well as the patients and the lay public. The earliest problem that affects the retina, we will call it as non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy, where the earliest features of diabetic retinopathy starts to be visualized in the retina. The next progression as it occurs in the diabetic retinopathy, will be the proliferative diabetic retinopathy. When proliferations, it can be vascular proliferations, it can be glial tissue proliferations, starts occurring in the retina, we will call it as proliferative diabetic retinopathy. The most important function-wise, the most important region in the retina is the macula. And when that macula is affected because of the retinopathy process, we will call it as diabetic maculopathy. This diabetic maculopathy may be associated with any stage, like a non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy, or it can be with a proliferative diabetic retinopathy. Diabetic retinopathy is a progressive disease. You all know that diabetes as such is not curable. Once you diagnose a person to have diabetes, he is going to live a diabetic for any number of years, and he is going to die a diabetic. Just like that, once the diabetic retinopathy starts in the retina, it is going to be a slowly progressive disease. It starts mild, progresses to a moderate, ultimately it goes to a severe and end-stage retinopathy if it is not diagnosed and treated. What are the diagnostic tools that we have to diagnose diabetic retinopathy? The most important tool that we have is an ophthalmoscope. Here I have mentioned it as an indirect ophthalmoscope. This is more for the ophthalmologist, where all the other clinicians and diabetologists use the direct ophthalmoscope. With this, we are directly able to see and visualize the retina, the posterior portion of the retina where diabetic retinopathy has affected, and we are able to classify and we are able to follow up after treatment what really happens to the retinopathy. A slit lamp examination with a 90 diopter lens is a very important diagnostic tool for the ophthalmologist. This examination gives us an anterior posterior cut of the retina where we are able to analyze the thickness of the retina and we are able to find out what really is happening as we are progressing with the treatment for diabetic retinopathy. The color photograph which you saw about a couple of slides earlier is taken by a special camera known as a fundus camera. And when you add on a fluorescein dye injection onto the patient and we're taking a series of black and white pictures, we do the fundus fluorescein angiographic examination. One of the most important evaluations that has now come into the market is the OCT, which gives it a microscopic evaluation of the retina, the various layers of the retina, the edema in the retina, all these things are found out with this OCT. What are the risk factors for diabetic retinopathy? I will say the most important risk factor for diabetic retinopathy is diabetes itself. Unless the patient is diagnosed to have diabetes, he is not going to have diabetic retinopathy. Now, to accelerate the process of diabetic retinopathy and to what we can say is to shorten the duration of diabetes mellitus before the appearance of diabetic retinopathy, if the diabetes is uncontrolled, then you will find that the retinopathy comes at an earlier days or even a couple of years later. If the patient has hypertension and if the hypertension is also uncontrolled, you will also realize that the diabetic retinopathy comes on a little faster. Nephropathy. We are all now giving a lot of importance to the urine analysis for microalbuminuria. Now, whether microalbuminuria in the urine comes first or microaneurysm in the retina comes first, it can be debatable. But once the clinician finds microalbuminuria in the urine, it is high time that the ophthalmologist has a look at the retina. Pregnancy. A pregnant woman can become diabetic and then have problems because of diabetic retinopathy. A diabetic woman can become pregnant and an accelerated type of diabetic retinopathy can set in. All these conditions are very important during pregnancy for the early diagnosis and aggressive treatment, sometimes even going on to termination of pregnancy to save the vision of the patient. Anemia is one of the most recognized causes of accelerating the appearance of diabetic retinopathy in a diabetic patient. Going into detail about the three stages of diabetic retinopathy, the earlier stage, the non-proliferative diabetic stage, the most important and the first appearance of in the retina will be the microaneurysm. All the other things, the retinal hemorrhages, which can be blot or dot shaped, it can be flame shaped, capillary non-perfusions, capillary dilatations, arteriolar occlusions and venous abnormalities are various inbuilt features that we can find for these non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy. I will be explaining to them now. Microaneurysm. This black and white picture that you are seeing is taken on a fluorescein angiographic picture. In that you will be seeing the blood vessels that are very clearly seen as white, where the fluorescein dye is taken up and then it is flowing through the blood vessel. Distributed along the posterior portion of the retina, you will find various dots are appearing. These dots are known as microaneurysms. They are aneurysmal dilatation of weak capillaries because the capillaries that are existing throughout the capillary bed of the retina, because of the process of diabetic retinopathy affecting the walls of the retina, they undergo weakness and they undergo localized aneurysmal dilatation. And when these aneurysmal dilatations fill up with the fluorescent dye, we have these microaneurysms that are seen very well on fluorescein angiogram. If you look at the retina of these patients, you will see that there are red dots on the retina which are clearly diagnostic of microaneurysms. Retinal hemorrhages. When these microaneurysms rupture and break, they will produce a small hemorrhage on the retina, which we will call it as retinal hemorrhages. When these hemorrhages are in the superficial layers of the retina, like here, they will be flame shaped in size and shape. and if they are deeper, they will be dot and blot hemorrhages. As you can see here, they are the dot and the blot hemorrhages when they are in the deeper layers of the retina. These are very small, they are microaneurysms that are rupturing and are not very clinically significant as far as vision is concerned. Capillary non-perfusions. Capillary non-perfusions is a feature that you can diagnose only by means of a fluorescein angiogram. By looking at the fundus with an ophthalmoscope, you cannot diagnose capillary non-perfusion. Look at the fluorescein angiographic picture here. You will see the vessels are taking up varied courses here that you can see. That's a normal courses. And in between them, you will find out ironed out area here. These are the ironed out area where it is clearly seen that fluorescein is not perfusing. This is known as capillary non-perfusions, and depending upon where it is distributed and how it is distributed, it can be known as focal, parafoveal, or the whole regional areas of capillary non-perfusions can take place. The arterioles are slightly larger blood vessels that are present in the bed of the retina, and when these arterioles go in a process of occlusion, we will produce soft exudates in the retina. These are the soft exudates or cotton wool spots that you can see. Also in the retina, you will also find areas of hard exudates. Now, carefully, if you look at these areas of hard exudates, you will realize that next to the hard exudates, there is fluid in the retina. Fluid in the retina will show a thickness of the retinal layers that can be clearly diagnosed by means of a slit lamp with a 90 diopters as well as with an OCT. Next to it, you will always find careful examination that there are a few microaneurysms. So it is the reverse process that occurs. The microaneurysms are there. Because of the weakness of the vessel walls, fluid leaves the intravascular space and comes out into the extravascular space, producing retinal edema. And these retinal edema, after a few months, starts going back into the vascular system, leaving behind proteinaceous material which are known as hard exudates. And depending upon where they are happening, it will produce or not produce a defective vision. Capillary dilatations. These capillaries are undergo also irregular dilatations at various processes. They are an aberrant or a failed effort to give blood to the hypoxic areas that are existing in these capillary non-perfusing areas. These are the areas of capillary non-perfusion, and these are the dilated capillaries that are seen here. And normal sized capillaries are not visualized individually. It is only these dilated capillaries, which are abnormally dilated capillaries, that are seen on these fluorescein angiographic pictures. Venous abnormalities. The veins that are existing throughout the retinal architecture undergo a process of dilatation which becomes very irregular in dilatation. They have a lot of kinking, duplications, venous looping occurring. Here, this is a classical loop that occurs. There sometimes be duplications of the vessel itself, where you will find that almost two veins are going side by side together. These are the various venous abnormalities that you will find in various stages of non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy. Classically, how a picture of a non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy will look like, with the various venous dilatation, the soft exudates are there, the hard exudates are there, the hemorrhages are there, and this is classically how non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy will look like. When proliferations start, formation of new blood vessels secondary to retinal ischemia. When proliferations start, it can be vascular, and along with it a group of glial tissue also undergoes a process of seeing all these proliferations. We will call the second stage as proliferative diabetic retinopathy. Depending upon where the proliferations occurs, if it occurs in the new vessels, these occurs at the level of the disc, we will call it as NVD. If these new vessels occur elsewhere in the retina, we will call it as NVE. Why are we so worried about these new vessels? These new vessels are very fragile. They do not have all the three coats of a normal blood vessel. They are just endothelial buds in which a small canalization has taken place. They are associated with little bit of glial tissue, and because of their fragility and any effort on the patient, like a sneezing, a Valsalva procedure, lifting up of the chair, going to the toilet, any one of these procedures can produce a bleeding from these new vessels, and we will call it as vitreous hemorrhage. This is because this hemorrhage occurs into the vitreous cavity, whereas the microaneurysms, when it ruptures, it produces a retinal hemorrhage on the surface of the retina, which is so minute, does not produce any problem. Whereas a vitreous hemorrhage that occurs into the vitreous cavity from these new vessels will produce an instantaneous drop in the visual acuity, even to almost just PLPR. I told you also, along with these new vessels, glial tissue is also proliferating. Glial tissue always has a phenomenon of contracture. When these contractures take place, it will pull on the retina and produce the tractional retinal detachment. When these new vessels grow everywhere, it can grow also in the angle of the anterior chamber, and it will produce a sharp rise in the intraocular pressure, leading on to neovascular glaucoma. All these conditions are serious blinding disorders. Here is a color picture of a proliferative diabetic retinopathy, where vitreous hemorrhage has occurred from the new vessels from the disc. This is a small vitreous hemorrhage. This is not a big vitreous hemorrhage. When a patient has this small vitreous hemorrhage, he will complain of vitreous floaters. A diabetic patient of yours, if he comes to you and then says, "Sir, I was very much normal yesterday, but today when I went to the toilet and then coming out, I suddenly find all sorts of vitreous floaters in front of my eyes," you must be cautious. Probably he has undergone a vitreous hemorrhage from a proliferative diabetic retinopathy. Carefully watch here. The blood vessels that are going here from the disc goes here, they all divide in two, and here you will find an arborization, a type of fan-shaped type of new blood vessels that is not classically normal. This new vessel is known as a neovascularization elsewhere in the retina. This neovascularization elsewhere in the retina does not produce any visual problems in the initial stages. This patient will come to you, will have 6/6N6, that is normal visual acuity, but it is almost like carrying a time bomb in his pocket. Anytime he sneezes, anytime he lifts up a chair, this particular new vessel can rupture and produce a massive vitreous hemorrhage, an instantaneous drop in his visual acuity to almost zero. Tractional retinal detachment. As I told you, everywhere, wherever there is glial tissue, traction can take place. When this glial tissues contract, they'll pull on the retina and produce tractional retinal detachment. They'll produce tractional retinal detachment in the periphery. You can see here, and also you can see here the tractions. These are the yellow glial tissues that is pulling onto the retina. End stage or advanced diabetic retinopathy changes. It is very sad to see these patients, but yet in spite of all the recent advances, rarely but even consistently we keep seeing that type of patients who have got such elaborate, almost the whole retina has been replaced by this glial tissue. It's an advanced stage of almost end stage diabetic retinopathy, where nothing much can be done for the patient and his visual acuity is almost going to be zero. I told you about diabetic maculopathy also. When the macula is involved in the diabetic retinopathy process, we will call it as diabetic maculopathy. Why are we so worried about this diabetic maculopathy is the whole visual acuity that the patient has when you are looking at someone and someone is looking at you. It is at this macula that the whole visual acuity takes place. The surrounding areas that people are able to see, the field of vision is looked after by the rest of the retina. The macula is just the size of a pin head, and that has got almost 95% of the vision. And when that portion of the macula, just that pin head of the macula is affected because of the diabetic maculopathy, because of the retinopathy process, visual acuity drops dramatically. The structure and function of the macula gives its importance and urgency for diagnosis and treatment. Diabetic maculopathy can be distributed in various ways. focal areas, small areas, ischemic areas when the macula undergoes a process of ischemia. The whole macula undergoes a process of retinopathy, we'll call it as diffuse maculopathy. It can be any mixture of these three. Carefully watch here. You will find the disc is here in this color photograph. You will find the hard exudates are existing here and fluid and microaneurysms are existing here. This is classically a feature of focal maculopathy, when that area of the macula is involved. You look at this color photograph, you will realize that the disc is here, the macula is here, the disc is here, and the whole posterior pole, due to some unknown cause, the vasculature of the posterior pole has given way. It is not able to retain fluid inside the vascular system. The vascular system starts leaking tremendous amount of fluid, and the whole retina becomes filled with macula, becomes filled with fluid, and we will call it as diffuse maculopathy. Look at this picture. See how the hard exudates are distributed so much on the macula, and this patient, we should have seen him, diagnosed him and treated him probably about 6 months earlier or 1 year earlier. Now, the visual acuity of this patient is going to be only about 50% or even 25%. Even after treatment, when all these hemorrhages and hard exudates disappear, you will realize that the patient's visual acuity is going to be low. This is what worries all our ophthalmologists, because once maculopathy, because of maculopathy, visual acuity comes down, even after treatment, it is not going to come back to the normal level. Here is how a circinate type, that is a type of circular type of distribution of the hard exudates is taking place. It is very near to the fovea. Fluorescein angiogram, when it is done, you will find that the microaneurysms are in the center of the circinate. It is here that the focus of treatment of laser will take place, and once these microaneurysms are destroyed, you will find these hard exudates will slowly disappear. But if the patient's visual acuity has come down because of the hard exudates or because of the fluid, his visual acuity is going to be poor in spite of the treatment. Carefully watch here. You will again see this is a color photograph of the fluorescein angiogram picture of the retina. The macular region, which is supposed to be here, is almost devoid of any architecture. The whole area looks ischemic. Blood is not flowing through this area. At the same time, the function of the macula also has come down, probably about 25% or 50%. And this type of maculopathy, when you diagnose, you will feel very sad because you are not going to give much treatment for these patients. Fluorescein angiogram is very useful in the diagnosis of these conditions, like you can see the ischemic maculopathy, very useful in the type of management, and now it has become very mandatory for follow-up. This is a picture of the fluorescein angiogram. Before, we were taking films of the fluorescein black and white films, but now the whole thing has been digitalized, and in probably about 2 to 3 minutes, we give out a printout, a digital printout of the whole fluorescein angiogram to the patients. What are the symptoms of diabetic retinopathy that the patient will come to you for? If the patient has got a non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy, any stage, if the patient has got a proliferative diabetic retinopathy but without a vitreous hemorrhage, no hemorrhage, at that time the patient will have absolutely no symptoms. His vision will be normal, he will be having a perfectly normal vision, normal life he will be leading. But when you look into the retina, into the fundus, and find out that the patient has got a proliferative diabetic retinopathy, he might have a large proliferations from the disc, he might have a large proliferations elsewhere. It is a very, very dangerous condition. You should be able to diagnose it earlier and refer for the various evaluations and treatment for diabetic retinopathy, because these patients will miss will miss their chance of having good vision throughout their life if at the right appropriate time they are not diagnosed and treated. Once vitreous hemorrhage occurs, if the vitreous hemorrhage is going to be mild, the patient will complain of floaters, like a small flies flying about in his eye. If the patient has got a severe vitreous hemorrhage, there will be a sudden painless loss of vision. I am stressing on the word painless, because once there is pain, it is probably the cause is something else. if it is going to be a painless sudden loss of vision and the patient has been a diabetic for 20 years, probably it can be a vitreous hemorrhage that has occurred. In the case of diabetic maculopathy, whatever it might be, early or late, what I will usually say is the patient, an intelligent patient, will be able to find out that his vision has come down, his contrast sensitivity has come down, his adaptability to night vision has come down. Clever patients will be able to tell you that they definitely find that their vision has come down, and once you look into the retina and you are able to see these maculopathic changes, it is high time that they are evaluated further and take the treatment appropriately. As far as the clinicians are concerned, what do we have to have as far as the management and the follow-up of the patient is concerned? If the patient is going to be a non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy, annual checkup of their retina is very, very essential. And if it is going to be, this is only the clinicians and diabetologists who are able to see them very, very often, and it is their advice that the patients follow very, very carefully. For the classical treatment of diabetic retinopathy, whether it is going to be advanced non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy, whether it is going to be a proliferative diabetic retinopathy and diabetic maculopathy, the mainstay of treatment is going to be laser therapy. If it is going to be a maculopathy and small areas of the retina, focal areas of the retina are affected, we will go in for a focal treatment. That is, that area of the retina where the microaneurysms are existing are treated, and we will wait for the microaneurysms to disappear, edema to disappear, and the macula to become quite normal. If the whole retina, there is a macula, is involved in this diffuse type of edema, diffuse type of maculopathy, a grid type of laser therapy is given. As I told you, if the macula has undergone the process of ischemia, blood supply to the macula has come down and the vision has come down, you will find that not much therapy is offered to these patients. Look at this black and white fluorescent angiograph pictures, you will realize, you can find out the various spots that are here. These are the scar tissues that come out after laser therapy for focal diabetic maculopathy. In the case of proliferative diabetic retinopathy, a condition where we have to give more aggressive laser therapy, we give the procedure known as pan-retinal photocoagulation, known as PRP. Very rarely, when there are new vessels elsewhere, with that area of the retina alone is treated by means of focal treatment, but we prefer to give the pan-retinal laser photocoagulation. This is how the retina will look like if you do a pan-retinal pan-retinal laser therapy, where all these white or yellowish spots that you see is because of the laser therapy, where there is an edema and non-septic edema of the retina in that area occurs, focal areas occur, and once this treatment is given, 360 degrees of the retina except the disc and macula, 360 degrees of the retina is treated by means of this pan-retinal photocoagulation. And the new vessels that have grown, the new vessels elsewhere, new vessels disc, you will find in about 3 to 4 months slowly undergo a process of regression and disappear. There is again a small vitreous hemorrhage that has occurred from a small new vessels from the disc, and once the photocoagulation, the pan-retinal photocoagulation, these are the scar tissues that are seen 365 degrees, you will find that they are seen here except the disc and macula. This is the disc and macula. So we are not treated anywhere here. All these things are treated, and the new vessels, the hemorrhages, everything clears. When the patient has a bleeding into the retina, bleeding into the vitreous cavity, vitreous hemorrhage, we will have to wait for about 3 months before we can really interfere. Majority of the patients, this vitreous hemorrhage clears in 3 months, and then we'll have to look into the retina and do a laser therapy to control the new vessels. If the vitreous hemorrhage does not clear in 3 months, we will have to think about a procedure known as vitrectomy, where the vitreous cavity with a vitreous gel along with the hemorrhage is removed by means of a most advanced machine known as a vitrector, and the whole hemorrhage is clear. Laser photocoagulation is done during the surgery itself, and we are able to get back the lost vision. If the patient has got a TRD or a tractional retinal detachment which is away from the macula, we usually watch, wait if it is progressing or not. If it is involving or threatening the macula, we will have to do a vitreous surgery and cut these membranes so that we are able to save the macular function. We have various studies that have been done throughout the world, the diabetic retinopathy study and other things, which all these studies confirms the benefits of laser therapy, and all these studies recommend specific protocols for our diabetic retinopathy management. Most of us throughout the world follow these structured program that these studies have given us by undergoing the process, by giving the benefit of laser therapy to our patients. Thank you. Friends, let me conclude. Diabetic retinopathy is definitely a sight-threatening and a dangerous, what we can say, a morbidity of diabetes mellitus. With an excellent care that physicians and diabetologists are giving our patients, we find patients living for about 20 years, 30 years, 40 years without any problem. It is the longevity of the patients after the diagnosing of diabetes mellitus and the life that they lead, we will find that diabetic retinopathy slowly starts creeping in. We are able to diagnose diabetic retinopathy very early. We are able to treat the diabetic retinopathy very efficiently. A lot depends upon early diagnosis and management. It is like the Titanic. Once the Titanic has sunk, all of us now get all these small bits of the sunken ship, and we are so glad that you are able to retrieve all these things. That should not happen as far as diabetic retinopathy is concerned. Even before visual acuity is affected because of the maculopathy, because of the vitreous hemorrhage, we must be able to diagnose these diabetic retinopathic patients, give them the appropriate treatment, and maintain their visual acuity till their end. A lot depends upon the diabetologists and the physicians whom these patients, they are seeing them almost I will say every month or every 3 months. Have a look into the retina by means of an ophthalmoscope. And as I have told you, any problem in the retina that you find, it is high time that they are referred to an ophthalmologist for further evaluations and management so that these patients live a normal life throughout their life. Thank you.